What up, guys? Welcome back to Darth Matu's Holocron. Happy to have you all. Today, we're taking a break from the lore and narrative to talk more about the craft of writing. You guys know I love that shit. Today, I wanted to take the time to chat about something that I call the 3 pillars of writing. I stake my life on these 3 pillars. I use them myself when I'm writing, and I can promise that learning to master them can only improve your writing game in the long term. I'll look at each of these pillars in depth, in detail in their own videos, but for now, I wanted to do a general overview just to get you guys set up. Alright, let's dig in. The first pillar of writing is writing. Yeah, I know, seems self-explanatory. This pillar can otherwise be summed up as the famous phrase, a writer writes. I think if you are listening to this video, then you have almost certainly heard that phrase before, but I think that too few actually take the time to examine what it means. A writer writes. What that means is that a writer actually takes the time to put pen to paper. I know that seems self-evident, but boy howdy, you would be surprised how many so-called writers there are out there who have never once produced so much as a single sentence. These folks are constantly hitting me up on social media to discuss their ideas, but that is all they ever are. Ideas. I cannot tell you how many times I've told someone, yeah, that sounds amazing, looking forward to seeing the story, and then no story is ever forthcoming. A writer writes. You can have the best story idea in the entire world, and it still does not make you a writer. That idea means exactly jack shit unless you get it actualized on the page in narrative form. The truth is that everyone wants to be a writer, but writing is very hard. It takes discipline and self-control. You have to take large chunks of time out of your day for it. The nature of the act of writing ensures that it consumes your full attention for that chunk of time. Everyone and their mother is capable of coming up with a story idea, but not everyone has the wherewithal to actually write it out. On top of that, you can't just spew words on the page. There is an objectively right way to write. I don't think we need to get into details here. Again, I'll examine all this in its own video later, but many of you have likely read bad writing before. You know it when you see it. The truth is that improving your writing, it requires you to write. And as we said, that's a task in and of itself. So, how does one manage to write? Well, again, self-discipline. You simply have to hold yourself to it. On some level, as in all things, ultimately, it is your personal responsibility to put pen to paper if that's really what you want. But, with that said, there are a few things you can do to help foster that discipline and make sitting down to write a bit easier. For one, having a set time to write is a good idea, a literal writing hour. Maybe you get up early in the morning before work, and you get that hour in while you're drinking coffee before you shower. Maybe you set aside an hour after work, or maybe you write on your lunch break. Whenever that time comes, that is your writing time. You must write during this time and fuck everything else. Another helpful tip is to set up a writing area. Maybe it's your desk, or a room in your house, or a bench in the park. Whatever it is, make that space your writing space. When you are there, you are in the writing mindset. It takes practice, but you can set up a space in your mind so that anytime you enter into that physical writing area, you automatically fall into writer mode. For me, it's my desk. When I sit down, even if it's just to play video games, I'm thinking of story, even in the back of my mind. Even now, I'm writing this script before work, in my writing hour, in my writing space. There are an infinite amount of other tips I could mention, but beyond these 2 things, having a time and a space for writing, these tips are highly variable and we'll examine them in their own video later. It's kind of up to you to find these things, you know? It takes practice sometimes. You have to play around to find the system that works for you as a person. For example, my process involves writing everything down in a physical notebook by pen first. My handwriting is shit, but it helps me concentrate to use a pen. Then, when I'm finished, I copy it over into digital format, and in the process of copying it over, I give it a quick edit. That's how I produce my rough drafts. Even editors only read my shit after I've written it into my notebook, then given it a quick once over as I typed it up in the old Google Docs. It really doesn't matter what you do, but if you want to write, you have to set up some kind of framework like this for yourself, a process that helps you produce. Setting up a writing space and time can act as a good foundation for this process, but it's up to you to build on that foundation. Just remember, a writer writes. Sometimes I will literally sit in my writing hour and type nonsense, just a string of gibberish that I'm fated to delete. But I promise you, the act of holding yourself to account will ensure that you produce a real story eventually. I have had many a time where I've been typing nonsense and the muse takes hold and gives the gibberish form. So, don't be afraid. Seriously, just type "all work and no play makes Jack a very bad boy" over and over and over again. If that's all that you can produce, eventually something real will come out. The second pillar of writing is editing. Yes, I know, some of you saw this one coming. Editing and writing are really two sides of the same coin. Writing out a sentence is one thing, but ensuring it follows proper form is another. And ensuring it has some art to it is another thing on top of that. Editing is a vital skill that every writer needs to master. The first person who should edit a rough draft should always be yourself. Always, always, always. Do not let anyone read anything that hasn't already been edited by you at least once. Seriously, I cannot stress what good advice this is. The greatest writers to ever live produce shit in their rough draft. It's simply the nature of the beast. Producing a story is akin to spiritual vomiting. You bring it forth from somewhere deep inside your head, and then you spew it across the page in all its messy glory. What turns writing from slop into art is the edit. The edit is where you refine. It's where you fix grammatical areas or iron out wrinkles in the narrative flow. It's where you tweak dialogue, and it's where you kill your darlings. A writer must master this skill to be a true writer. Otherwise, they're not producing refined stories, they're just producing words. Editing is hard. It takes a critical eye, and unfortunately, it's a learned skill that is not often taught anymore. The good news is that the more you edit, the better you get at it. I know many of you have likely heard of hiring editors, or of editors on staff at publishers. Yes, these people exist, but they are expensive, and if they are working at a publisher, they aren't going to be seeing anything you do that hasn't already been edited a few times. Do not send any manuscripts to anyone until you've gone over it at least 3 times. Trust me, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. Editing is something best learned through practice, but there are a few tips you can use to improve in this regard. For one, try to edit some of the stories you love. No work is ever perfect. There are typos and mistakes in every book ever printed. See if you can find them while you're reading your favorite books. It will help you train your eye to notice these things. Another great piece of advice that has more than proven its worth to me is a tidbit that I picked up from Stephen King. Mr. King mentions the importance of editing in his book, On Writing, and he gives a great tip to help. He says that when you finish a story, put it in a drawer and walk away. Forget about it entirely. He recommends leaving that story to sit for 6 months, then coming back to it to read it again. By that time, you would have almost completely forgotten the details of the narrative yourself, and when you come back to it, it will be with the perspective of one of your readers. The mistakes will stick out at you then, like glowing road signs. I can personally attest that this method works. I can't say that I wait the full 6 months. For me, I put the story aside and then I just come back to it when I feel like it. Sometimes that is 2 or 3 weeks. Other times, it can stretch for years. I recently just edited a story that I had written in 2008 when I was still trying college out, almost 20 years later. It doesn't matter how long you wait. What matters is that you create that distance from your own work so that you can see it with fresh and unbiased eyes. The fact is that creating a story is a very involved and energy-intensive process. You get very close to these works. It's not too far to compare them to the writer's children. They are a massive investment, both in time and focus. There really is no way around that, but unfortunately, the act of creating a story often brings you so close to it that you miss the warts. Internal bias is absolutely a thing, and you have to account for that in order to properly edit. Giving yourself some time before coming back to the story is the single best way to do that. Again, I'll talk more about editing in a future video. It's absolutely a vital skill, and there are plenty of editing tidbits that can help you out that go beyond the scope of this video. But for now, just remember, Give yourself the space you need to properly edit and put in some practice editing some well-loved stories that you have in your back pocket. Finally, we reach the last pillar, though it is no less important than the other two. In fact, it might be the most important. The third pillar of writing is research. Research, research, research. This is another point that Stephen King brings up in On Writing, and it's one that I can attest to again through personal experience. You must research whatever you are writing. There's simply no way around it. If you don't, then you won't be able to write properly. And I'm not talking about reading a Wikipedia page. I'm talking about honest-to-God research. Stephen King, in On Writing, talks about when he was going to write a story about police officers, and how, before he did that, he called several police departments to ask them questions about it. He signed up for ride-alongs, he interviewed officers, and he just observed them as they went about their day. This is what you have to do in order to be able to effectively write about any given subject. The truth is that writing is a mental art. You may have heard the saying, we write what we know. Research is how you fuel what you know. It's how you give yourself more mental tools to use when you're building something. You must research before you can properly use a thing. You have to know the thing inside and out so that you can create a fictional version of it that at least has some semblance of authentic resonance. This is vital to building a believable framework for a narrative that's capable of drawing the reader in. To give an example of bad research, I need look no further than The World of Darkness. Some of you are likely familiar with it. I've covered some of its lore here on this channel. The World of Darkness is infamous for leaning into stereotypes when creating its lore. As an example, they have a Native American group of werewolves, and one of their special powers is a power called Indian Giver. I don't think I need to elucidate more on how that simply does not work. Not only is it a bigoted and negative stereotype put into fiction, but because it has no basis in anything other than the stereotype, it fails to resonate authentically as an actual Native American plot element. World of Darkness was written in the 90s, before the internet was ubiquitous, which meant to research, one had to physically travel to a library somewhere at the very least, if not outright get outside your comfort zone to talk to the right individuals. You can tell plainly from the nature of just this one power that the writers of World of Darkness did not do this. They filled in the lore with what they had heard or what they thought they knew, and this resulted in offensive stereotypes being layered throughout the work. You do not want to be like this. I want to make it very clear. You do not have to be Native American to write about Native culture, just like you don't have to be Korean to use Korean culture as an influence, or Irish to use Irish culture. You are a human being, and thus, you are fully capable of empathizing with other human beings, even ones from new and strange cultures, regardless of their context. Further, you're capable of projecting that empathy into inspiration. It is the single most time-honored way of building stories, taking culture and mythology from the past and using it as inspiration. It's key to the entire process. But with that being said, you do not want to fill in the blanks with things that you think you know. You do not want to lean on stereotypes. If you feel drawn to Korean culture, you like the aesthetic, you want it in your story, then it is your job as a writer to learn Korean culture inside and out, to the extent that the only reason it isn't your own culture is because you weren't born into it. You can't fictionalize something that you do not understand. So to use Korean culture as an inspiration properly, you have to be able to understand it, the same way someone born into it understands it. This requires an enormous amount of legwork. It is possible, but it takes a lot of work. And yes, it is hard to research. You need to read boring academic papers, call strangers out of the blue to ask questions. You have to go to new places, set up interviews, etc. The internet has made a lot of this easier, but I think you can begin to see why so many storytellers stumble when it comes to research. It is a skill in and of itself to be able to research properly, just like editing is. It takes practice, some modicum of social skills, and the ability to critically think. This goes for things beyond just culture and mythology as well. If you want to write about guns, you have to understand guns. If your story uses swordplay, then you must understand swordplay. There's simply no way to effectively describe a thing unless you have some understanding about it, and this will require you to research. The bulk of time in any given project that you will ever engage in will be on the research. I promise you this. Honestly, this is one of my favorite aspects of writing. Good writers come to know the world in a way few people do. They actively engage with life in a way that many others do not even conceive. We go out and we purposefully find things that we know nothing about, and then we become at least functional in that subject, if not masters of it. There are very few people who are as well educated as a good writer, and this is almost purely because that writer will have educated themselves on many subjects. They would have had to if they had any intention of actually being good at their craft. Do not take shortcuts when it comes to research. The internet has made it easier than ever before in human history to research a subject. You can find anything online. Wikipedia is shit for information, but it is amazing to find sources. They have an entire section at the bottom of every page with plenty of legit academic resources that they attempt to pull their information from. Set aside time to dive into research. Follow up on information that makes you curious. Work that Google like it owes you money, baby, but remember, there's a lot of bullshit out there. In general, it's a good benchmark of accuracy if you see a tidbit of information repeated across multiple sources. But be careful. Only accept something as truth when you are sure, and after that point, then you can use it in your stories. There's nothing more embarrassing for a writer than to get called out on their research. So don't be the one that gets caught insisting George Washington really did cut down an apple tree. And definitely don't be the one caught using stereotypes to fill in blank spots. But okay guys, those are the 3 pillars of writing, editing, and research. Master each of these skills, and you will go far in your fiction. I can guarantee it to you. We're coming down to the end of the video now, and I want to take the time to highlight one more thing a writer can do to master the 3 pillars. Read. Read as much as you can. The more you read, the better off you will be when it comes to the 3 pillars, flat out. Reading helps you digest the way that others have written stories. You see their style, their narrative choices. It gives you an opportunity to practice editing by keeping an eye out for mistakes, and more, it gives you an opportunity to research. If you ever run into a term or concept that you're unfamiliar with in a story, Google that shit. If you ever see a word you don't recognize, fucking Google it. A good writer researches, right? So you can set up good habits just by reading books. Any given novel that you pick up off the shelf should have research concepts in it if it's good. For example, maybe you're reading Star Wars, you see some lightsabers, and you have the thought, can a magnetic sheath really contain plasma? Follow that thought. Work the Google, see what there is to see. You can learn a lot as a person that way, which in turn gives you an incredible amount of fodder for your own stories. But alright guys, that is bringing us down to the end of this one today. The 3 pillars of writing, again, writing, editing, research. Master these 3, and a great writer you will be. I hope you guys found this video helpful, that it aids you in improving your own stories or gaining some inspiration. I apologize for the construction going on in the background and for the sound of my voice. I've been pretty sick lately, but doing all good now. So if you enjoyed, please leave a like, hit subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Take care of yourselves out there, guys. And until next time, may the Force break your chains.